Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist Podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I want to talk about the good economic data that we've been getting over the past couple of days and weeks. The economy is starting to cook under Trump. Let Trump cook, folks. Things are getting better. Inflation's getting better. We've had real wage growth. Recent job numbers are good. GDP is good. Everything is rocking. And yet Trump's not getting any credit for it. It's sort of amazing. You know, the border's secure. Everything is getting better economically for the most part. So far, we haven't gone into any major conflicts, although things are getting a little bit dicey with Iran. But Trump's not getting any credit for all the good news, and I want to talk about why, and I want to break down some of the good economic news. But before we get into it all, I need you to do something, folks. It's so simple. It's so easy. A Chad could do it. A Democrat could do it. A Marco Rubio could do it. That's how easy this is. I need you to subscribe, whether on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever the hell you're listening to this podcast. Please subscribe. And if you are listening on the YouTubes, like and comment helps a great deal with the algorithm. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. So, yes, we've had some great news in the economic department recently. And this is important because the economy is probably, most elections, it's usually the driving force, and it's probably the biggest reason Trump was elected to a second term. People were totally crushed by the inflation that the Biden administration had to deal with. Whether you blame the Biden administration or not, the inflation happened under his watch. To the extent Biden, has a watch or could do anything, that dude was still mentally declined. I don't think he was really running things, as everyone knows if they watched that famous debate. Bro's brain was basically soup. But whether you blame the Biden administration or not for spending too much money or whatever, the inflation under their administration crushed a lot of Americans, especially coming out of the pandemic. And it's a big reason why Trump got elected. And that gets us to the first good news. When it comes to inflation, core inflation, according to the Consumer Price Index, inflation slowed in January 2026 with the CPI up about 2.4% year over year, the lowest pace in nearly 5 years. The monthly CPI rose modestly, around 0.2%, and core inflation also remained subdued. So we have essentially the CPI as the lowest we've had in 5 years. That's great economic data when it comes to inflation. We had real wage growth over the past year. Average hourly earnings rose about 3.7% year over year, indicating continued moderate wage gains. That's according to the Washington Post. And that 3.7% is higher than the 2.4%, meaning the wage growth outpaced inflation, meaning there was actual real wage growth this past year. That never happened under the Biden administration. And I don't think any of his 4 years was there actual wage growth. There was wage growth during Trump's first term, and now we're continuing to see wage growth into Trump's second term. I think that's very important. Other good economic data. Unemployment. The unemployment rate ticked down a peg. It was at 4.4%. It went down to 4.3% in January 2026, slightly lower than the previous month, a sign that the job market remains relatively tight. That's again according to the Washington Post. What about jobs? This is probably where the Trump administration's been probably the weakest. The job numbers were not great during his first year, but according to the January 2026 jobs report, the U.S. economy added 130,000 jobs in January of 2026, beating expectations and showing stronger than forecast hiring momentum. Again, that's according to the Washington Post. Not only that, real GDP expanded 4.4% in the third quarter of 2025, which was from July to September. One of the best GDPs we've had in over 2 years. We've still had some difficulties with the Fed, you could say, but overall, these are really good economic numbers. Inflation is down, core inflation is down in terms of the rate. Obviously, prices are increasing, but the only times prices will actually decrease is if you have a recession or a depression, which you don't want. So yes, prices are technically expanding, but the actual rate is decreasing. That's important to know. Because remember all the hysteria, the tariffs. Trump's supporting tariffs. Prices are going to go up 10, 15, 20, 30, 50%. All this fear mongering for the quote unquote experts, these idiots. The same people who told you that COVID came from a lab, these brainiacs, these geniuses, were saying, oh, the tariffs are going to increase and everything's going to go up 100%. You're not going to be able to buy a pair of shoes. You're not going to be able to buy anything because of the tariffs. Well, that was wrong. Prices have not increased at all. In fact, inflation, the rate has actually gone down, not up, even since the tariffs were implemented. So just off of that, the inflation number, which is probably the biggest thing that hurt the Biden administration, was inflation. Trump has gotten it under control. Gas prices are down. Egg prices are dramatically down. Some areas the prices aren't down. Beef is still extremely expensive. They need to work on that. But inflation has been put under control for the most part. And that's huge. Now, again, the job numbers were not so good in Trump's first year. No doubt about that. We had less jobs were created during Trump's first year than the previous year, which was Biden's last year. That's problematic. However, like I said, for January, the jobs reports was much stronger than expected. Again, over 130,000 new jobs were added, which totally beat expectations by a lot. That's nothing to sneeze at. And I think, especially with some of the new provisions of the Big Beautiful Bill, I think you're going to see probably jobs increasing, more jobs being added, because I think there are some good incentives for businesses. And I think people will have more take-home pay because of certain deductions that you can now take because of the Big Beautiful Bill. So I think this is all good stuff. And again, the GDP was outstanding. It was just a lot of 4.4% annualized in quarter 3 of 2025. A lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff. Now, why is Trump not getting the credit for this? We have low unemployment. We have inflation under control. We've had a real wage growth, which again never happened during Biden's 4 years. We had a strong jobs report. The economy, with all this fear-mongering about the tariffs that we're going to take out the economy, that hasn't happened. We have good economic numbers. Why is Trump not getting the credit? Now, number one, probably because, again, during Trump's first year, the job numbers were relatively weak. There's no question about that. Less jobs were added during Trump's first year than in Biden's last year. So that is, I think that's going to change in 2026. But that is a fact. Whether, you conservatives listening to this podcast, you may not like to hear that, but that is true. So that is probably one of the reasons Trump is not getting credit, because the job market has remained sort of weak in terms of adding, especially good paying jobs. It's been relatively weak. But I think that's probably maybe the biggest reason, or one of the biggest reasons. But another reason is because of this whole Epstein fiasco. People are so focused on Jeffrey Epstein, this freak who's dead. The media, Democrats, even a lot of Republicans like Thomas Massie, who, I know a lot of people like Thomas Massie. I don't. This dude has totally, he's hurt the Republican Party. He's hurt the Trump administration. He's demagogued the whole Epstein files. I mean, he's making claims today that there's this international child sex trafficking scheme. And I know this is going to be a little controversial to say, but there's no evidence of an actual sex trafficking child operation where Epstein was supplying people in positions of power, children, and then would get blackmail on those individuals. There's no evidence of that. He had sex with minors, with 17, maybe 16-year-olds, and that's terrible. He was prosecuted for that. He pleaded guilty to that. But that doesn't mean he was actually sex trafficking minors to Bill Gates, to people in the United States, to Donald Trump, for instance. Total bullshit. There's no evidence of that. And there really isn't. I mean, I kid you not, Jeffrey Epstein, what he was convicted of was having sex with a 17-year-old a day before her 18th birthday. I shit you not. That's what he was actually prosecuted of in the early 2000s. And it wasn't even on his island. It was in Florida, where the age of consent is 18. Okay, that's what he was prosecuted of. Okay? With having sex with a 17-year-old a day before her 18th birthday and paying her. Now, he shouldn't have done that because the age of consent is 18, and she was technically below the age of 18, and, it's illegal to pay anyone for sex, let alone a minor. So he was right that he was prosecuted, but that doesn't mean he was sex trafficking 10-year-olds to people to get blackmail on them, and then he was working for Israel. There's no evidence of that. Look, you can like Israel, not like Israel, but there's no evidence that Israel was using children to get blackmail so Israel could like control the United States, which is like the popular. I don't want to get into Epstein too much. I'll probably do a podcast breaking down that fiasco more. But the point is, people are so focused on this Epstein fiasco, and the media has successfully convinced the public that the Trump administration is protecting pedophiles and trying to cover up a child sex trafficking operation, that people are unhappy with the Trump administration, even though we've had good economic news. Not only that, to put aside the economy, look at the border. He totally secured the border. We've had essentially zero illegal crossings at the southern border. That was one of the worst parts of the Biden administration, was how he totally left the border wide open. The Trump administration's locked down the border. People aren't coming in illegally. That's a huge W. That's better than Trump's first term at the border. And like, I'm supposed to be like not happy with Trump because he's not prosecuting people. Who is he supposed to prosecute from the Epstein files? Who are these high-profile individuals where there's credible evidence they've, had sex with minors that the Trump administration isn't prosecuting? Where can I get some names, folks? I know Thomas Massie, this idiot, or Ro Khanna, even more of an idiot. He keeps saying, "Oh, these people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, the former congresswoman, Nancy Mace, another very beautiful Nancy Mace." But all these people are saying there's these names of these individuals that the Trump administration is protecting. Well, who are these people? You can say it. Who are the people that the Trump administration is refusing to prosecute? It doesn't exist. There's no evidence. Again, I'm getting sidetracked on Epstein. See, even I'm stuck doing it because it sucked all the oxygen out of the room, this Epstein fiasco, when overall Trump's doing a good job. Not everything's been perfect. His foreign policy I've been a little bit critical of. I don't like how aggressive he's been toward Iran. I think he's doing that at the behest of Israel for the most part. But look, when he struck Iran back last summer, we took out their nuclear facilities, and then he got a ceasefire like 2 days later. It's not the worst thing in the world. He took out Maduro. I was a little bit worried because he said we were going to run Venezuela, but that hasn't happened. Currently, the Venezuelan government is still running Venezuela, at least for the most part. We have not done regime change in Venezuela. So we took out Maduro without doing regime change. That's not the worst thing in the world. Now, we'll see. It looks like we may have to strike Iran again. But at least up until now, Trump has not gotten us in another regime change war. Okay, we've not been stuck in a protracted conflict. Trump's just done very precise military interventions, but he's gone in and out, and he's been successful in them. So whether or not I'm skeptical of some of these, at least we're not stuck in these countries for years, like what George W. Bush did, what Obama did, what Biden has done with Russia, Ukraine. Now, that's another issue where Trump could probably get that war ended quicker if he really had the incentive to, but he has a lot of issues with Europe, and we already gave him all this money under the Biden administration. It really makes, that's a whole quagmire. I guess that's maybe a little bit hypocritical for me to criticize Biden but give Trump a pass, but I do think Trump is correct that the Russia-Ukraine war probably doesn't happen if Trump was president back during 2022, because I do think Trump would have put pressure on the Ukrainians to make a deal as compared to the Biden administration, which essentially told Ukraine that they can't make a deal. So I don't want to be hypocritical. I do think Trump could do more to get this war ended. And Biden had problems too, but Trump at the beginning probably could have prevented it by essentially forcing the Ukrainians to make a deal early on, which the Biden administration did not do. So when Trump got into office, they're already in the middle of a war. The Ukrainians don't want to end a war since they've already been fighting for 2 years. It's just, again, I don't want to make excuses for Trump and then criticize Biden, but I do think Trump was given a very tough situation with the Russia-Ukraine. And he was given a tough situation with Israel, Gaza, and Trump got a ceasefire. That's another thing. He got a ceasefire in Israel, Gaza. He got the Israeli hostages back, these innocent people who were suffering for years. And Israel wasn't capable of getting them back. Biden wasn't capable of getting them back, and Trump did. And he helped stop the people who were being killed in Gaza, I think innocent Palestinians. These people, I think, were arguably, I do think you can make an argument that was genocide, whether you want to be technical or not. At the very least, I think Israel was trying to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And Trump ended that too. So he got a win for the Israelis. He got a win for the Palestinians. And I'm supposed to be mad at Trump and think Trump's doing a bad job? No. Overall, he's done a good job back in office. Not perfect, but he's done a good job. But he's not getting the credit because of this whole Epstein bullshit. So, anyway, that's my rant about, Trump's done a good job with the economy. He's done a good job with the border. He's done okay with foreign policy, a little shaky. Again, some of these wars, the hawkishness toward Iran and not ending the Russia war is definitely a point against him. But overall, he's done a good job. But everyone wants to talk about his Epstein. So I don't know. It's overall he's done a good. Let Trump cook, folks. Have a little faith in him. Let him cook. The administration is not perfect, but overall, so much better than the last one. The Biden administration. And in some ways better than his first term. In some ways maybe a little bit worse, but he was good in his first term and he's been good in his second term, and he deserves the credit. He really does. Anyway, folks, that's it for today. We should be back tomorrow. Please, again, subscribe, whether on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever the hell you listen to your podcasts. And if you are listening on the YouTube, is like and comment. It helps a great deal. Once again, folks, hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye-bye.